Right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session. This is the first of the 2024 intermediate sessions. So we are going to be looking at using Just2easy to teach data. My name's Nikki Kimball. I'm one of the educational consultants here at Just2easy. So a bit of session housekeeping. It is a 45-minute session, so we should be done by about 4:15, give or take a few minutes. As always, questions can be asked via the chat function. I have Mary in the background who will try and answer your data questions. Anything she can't answer, Mary will relay to me throughout the session, and I will check the chat function at the end of the session if there's any questions that haven't been answered. I will be doing a Q&A session at the end as well, so you can ask me those questions at the end. This session is being recorded and will be made available through YouTube. So hopefully by the end of this evening, we should have that uploaded for you to refer back to or to pass on to colleagues that might find this useful. Now, in terms of content and what we're going to cover, I have split it into very much a Key Stage 1 following on to a Key Stage 2 parts of the session. So as part of our Key Stage 1 focus, we're going to look at JIT Pictogram and JIT Chart, so how you can use those in your Key Stage 1 classroom. And then for the Key Stage 2 part of the session, we're going to look at creating branching databases with JIT Branch. And we're also going to focus on database, so creating your own databases and also using examples that are available to you. And I'm also going to highlight some library resources that we have available that are focused around J2 data. We've got some quite nice library resources that you can access. So let's delve straight into it. And we're going to start with JIT Pictograms, probably our easiest tool for teaching data. So JIT Pictogram is part of the JIT toolkit, and it allows you to use existing templates. You can edit those templates, and you can also create your own pictogram activities. You can lock and unlock the pictogram, and you can also share it with your students. I'm going to show you how to do all of these things. So these are just some examples that we have available. So the good old examples, how you travel to school. Okay, so that's that pictogram there. So we can see clearly that walking to school is the most popular. And this is a creating your own. So with Safer Internet Day coming up, this is a great way of tying this in. This is sort of the kids going away and logging what devices they have at home. So you can create your own pictogram buttons, and then they can tally up their data in that pictogram. So pictogram can be found within JIT. It's this lovely yellow tile. Now, JIT is 8 tools within the same toolkit, and pictogram can be found up here on this red tab here. So as with all the JIT tools, it will prompt you to choose a template. So there are some pre-existing ones ready to use. So we've got the normal sort of popular pictogram examples. So what pets does everyone have? Favourite fruits, mini beasts, journey to school, and the weather. So let's go with the journey to school. So I'm going to click on that, and that is going to open up our pictogram template. And you also have the blank template that you can use. I will show you how to use that in a second. But this template will open in the locked version. So you could just use this and get the students to open it up and start adding in their data. They can press the plus and the minus button to take away data. There we go. And use it in its most basic form. So that's really good for your younger students, just getting used to using those buttons and not really having to change anything about this template. We've also got this tick box that says edit down at the bottom. So I can tick that, and that is now going to give me my editing tools. So you can see here I've got my editing tools. I could draw on any of these buttons. I can also add an additional button. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add. Now, if you wanted to take any of these away, unfortunately, you do have to delete and keep deleting, but you can change any of these buttons. So if I was to change one of these, I would just click the white paint button and white that out. and that will allow you to then stamp onto that. Now, if you are feeling fancy and you do want to encourage some art and design, you could get your students to draw onto the buttons, but I personally tend to prefer using the clip art libraries just because of ease of use. So at the moment it's opened up into my animals clip art library. So to open up our clip art libraries, I'm going to click that word that says animals, and there we've got lots of libraries to choose from. So I'm going to find my transport, and there we go. I've got a different coloured car there. I might have a green car instead. So I've clicked on my green car, and now if I hover over my pictogram, I can stamp that in that box. Now, when you're using this with a large device like a PC or a laptop, it's quite easy to click on that box at the bottom. So we can just click in there, and that's going to add that in. Now, I'm going to sort of undo that. On your smaller devices, so certainly things like iPads and Chromebooks that are much smaller, that might be a bit trickier. So what's nice about Pictogram is you don't actually have to, I'm going to click on that car, you don't actually have to click in that box. As long as you are in some area above that box, you can see that box is now red. I can click, and that's just going to add that into that box. So the students don't have to be precise with clicking in this box to change it. Now I'm going to add an additional option here, and I'm going to do a web search. So this, and I'm going to zoom in just so you can see, this little globe here allows us to search for images that might not be in the clip art libraries. So if I click that, I can keyword search. So let's look for roller skates, for example. That's going to give me some options here. So I've got lots of images I can choose from. I can use that arrow at the bottom and keep searching, but I think I'm going to go back and use this one here. So as soon as I click on that image, it's going to allow me to stamp that into that box. Now, the other thing I can do is I've got my label, so I can click where it says label, and I can type the label for that particular image. And there we go. And I have finished editing my pictogram. Now I can remove the editing options, so that removes all of that bump around the left-hand side and sort of streamlines the view for my students. Now I could have this as a whole class activity, my students coming to the board and entering the data, so they could just click these buttons like that. If I want my students to do this independently and for each of them to have their own copy, we can share this activity, and this goes for any of the JIT activities. I'm going to show you how to do this with Pictogram, but I won't show you with chart and branch, but the same process would be relevant. So I'm going to name that pictogram. So I'm going to say ways to school, and I'm going to hit save. So the save button is here, and you'll get the lovely spinny saving button, and the save button will grey out, so you can only save one copy. So that's great for your students. You're not going to end up with multiple copies of the same file. So to share this with my students, I'm going to go back to my J2 launch, and I'm going to go to my My Files. So anything that we save in Just2easy will save into your My Files. So to share this with my students, I'm going to hover over my pictogram. So here it is, Ways to School. I'm going to click on the green circle. There we go. And I've got my share option here. So I'm going to click on this button. That's going to give my share box. And the easiest way to do it, I'm going to zoom in just so you can see, is to press this little sort of double-headed arrow, and that will give me a drop-down menu. I can share my whole school if I wanted to. You will more than likely have your class there if you're a managed service or if you're a manual school. The only people that won't be able to are C2K users. You will probably have a staff class there. So if you are joining us from C2K, you can access your class through the All Classes tab. So there we go. So we can share that with class 1. I'm also going to type Lottie because she's my demo pupil, just so I can show you the pupil content. So that is now accessible to them forever, unless I remove permissions, and I can just click on that X and that will remove share permissions. So I'm just going to zoom out. So to give you an idea from a student perspective, my students would log in. They would go to the shared files button on their Launchpad. They then tick this list files box, and there is that pictogram that we have created. So my student can click in that. Maybe, for example, she's done a tally chart on a piece of paper and she transfers the data. So she could say, right, 2, 5, and then lots of people walking, and then 1 person roller skating. So she's entered her data. All she needs to do is click save, and that's going to move. So the template will stay in that shared files area, but she will have a version now in her My Files area. So if I open up her, she's in her shared files at the moment, she's got a tab for My Files, and there we go. There is her pictogram in her My Files. So as a teacher, you will always have access to that through the pupil files area. So I can open up Lottie, she's in class 1. There's her folder, and there is her pictogram. So I can see that pictogram and I can offer her some feedback if I want to, using the learning conversation. So that is JIT Pictogram. The only other thing to say is once they've created some data, you do also have the Save as Image button in the top right. So you can click that and that will just save the data that's on that page as an image. So that is an option as well. So we have looked at JIT Pictogram. We've used existing templates, editing templates, creating your own, lock, unlock the pictogram and share the pictogram. Now creating your own, that works in exactly the same way. You would just use a blank template and you would add in those images as we showed here. So for the Safer Internet Day, all I did was did a web search and I looked for a laptop, for example, and I click on the image, stamp that in that box, and then I keep doing that for all of my images. So let's go for a phone and I can stamp that in there. And there we go. And then I would rename those labels, name the file, and then share it with my students. That's how you would create one from scratch. We're going to look at JIT Chart now. So JIT Chart allows you to, again, same as Pictogram, use a template or create your own. Edit the template or the table. View a table, pie chart, bar chart, line chart, and block chart. So we have 4 different chart types. You can save, same as we did with Pictogram, and you can also export as an image, same as we did with Pictogram. So let's have a look. So I'm staying within my JIT, and I'm going up to Chart tab here. So it's a lovely orange surround. So it's got this continuity of interface. It prompts the children to choose a template, or they can create their own blank one. I'm going to create a blank one, but just to show you, there are some preset ones, so we can click on boys and girls and it will pre-populate the table. So all the children need to do is to add in the numbers. Okay, you can edit that table further. I mean, this has all sorts of connotations, boy, girl. We won't get into it. So you could add another option underneath. You can also change the colours of the columns or the segments, depending on which chart you're using, and you can change the label of the column. So I'm going to create a blank one here, and let me have a think. We're going to go for favourite. Let's go for favourite ice cream. So I'm going to change, first of all, the title of the column. So ice cream, and the number that stays. And then I'm going to add in my options. So we'll go with the old favourites, and I hit enter. It's going to take me to the next row, which is really great for building up your students' typing skills. Let's go for vanilla, strawberry, and I don't know why anybody would like this, mint choc chip. There we go. Now I'm going to add my numbers in. So let's just add some random numbers, and again I can hit enter, and that's going to populate that chart immediately so they can see. And there we go. Now the other thing I can do, as I said, is you can change the chart colours. So chocolate, it's got to be brown, hasn't it? Vanilla, I mean, the closest to kind of a cream colour is yellow. We'll go for strawberry's got to be red. And then we'll go for mint chocolate chip, we'll go for green. So there we go. So you have your table. That always comes on as default, and the block chart is always the default option, but the children can click on these chart types here, and that will add that onto their page. So they can start having a look at which chart type best represents that particular element of data. They can remove the table if they want to. And they can save at this point, or they can switch off and just have one chart if they wanted to. Now, this is something that I've learned this week. I've been working here for 4 years and I still learn things about this site even now. You can click on a pie chart and it will split the segments. Brilliant. And they can, you know, have the data in multiple formats. Then when they're done, they rename the chart. So let's have fave ice creams. They can, if they want to, record audio. That goes throughout the JIT tools. So this is a nice way of building in maybe some analysis. So they could talk about how they created the data, what the data shows. So you could have that as an attributed audio file. And then when you're done, you click the save button up here, and that will save a copy into your My Files. If a pupil's doing it, it would save into their My Files. And you've also got the save as image option here in the top right. So that will save as a flat image. So just to show you in your My Files, there is the fave ice creams. So that is the working document. So the students can click on that and they can edit that further if they needed to. And then this is the flat image. So that's great if you need, oh, that's funny, that's printed incorrectly. Mary, if you could note that as a support issue, because that shouldn't be doing that. But that is great if you need things printed off your maths book, for example. Okay, so you can print that off. Right, so that is JIT Chart. So we've used a template, we've created our own, edited the template, we've looked at the different chart types, we've saved, and we've exported as an image. So nice and easy so far. We're moving more into our Key Stage 2 activities. So this is JIT Branch. So as far as we know, this is one of the only tools of its kind. And JIT Branch is all to do with classifying data and sorting data. It features, I know in the English curriculum, it's around sort of end of year 3, beginning of year 4. So I suspect it's quite similar elsewhere in your kind of P4-5 year groups. And these are just 2 examples. So we've got a very simple mini beast sorting activity. So we've got 7 bits of data, and then we've used various questions to sort those mini beasts. So we will look at doing this. This is a much more complex version. So this is a Guess Who game. If I was back in school, I'd love to do this with the class, where they took pictures of themselves or pictures of their classmates and then sorted using various questions. So things like, do you wear glasses? Do you have blue eyes? Do you have long hair? That sort of thing. So that's quite a nice activity. But that does require a lot more data and a lot more time. So I don't have time to show you how to do this. So in JIT Branch, we can add a background if we wanted to. We can add various bits of data, classify and sort that data using questions. There is a simple and an advanced mode, and I'll go into that, and you can save that. So Branch is still within JIT. So it is up here, this lovely purple tab. And again, it opens up the same as we've looked at with JIT. It's going to prompt you to choose a template initially. Now, personally, I prefer to have a blank background just because I think it streamlines it. But you're more than welcome to add in a background that's relevant. So maybe if you are doing some mini beast sorting, you could have a park background or a wood background. So they are nice to add in if you want to. You do also have the option to add in pictures as backgrounds. So anything that you've got in your My Files. And you can search for pictures. So for example, if we are doing mini beasts, we could look for a woods background and we can add a photograph in, so that can add an element of interest onto that page. But for today's example, I'm going to go with a blank background. So the concept with JIT branch is that you choose the bits of data. I'm going to lay them on the page and then we'll add in the questions. So I am going to stick with the mini beasts activity. So I'm going to use the mini beasts clip art library. Now, just to highlight, there are other options available, and this is great for building on skills. So if you're building it more towards your end of Key Stage 2, so your kind of P6s and 7s, you do also have the option to add in pictures from your My Files. So maybe you have been on a mini beast hunt, for example, you've taken photographs of certain mini beasts. You could use photographs. You've also got the web search function. So we could look for an ant, for example, and you can add those in. And you can also add words in. But I am going to stick with my clip art, as I said. So I'm going to find my mini beast clip art. That's going to open up my library. And I'm just going to add 4 bits of data just to keep it simple. So I'm going to click on my B, and as soon as I click on my B, that's going to add that onto my tree, as it's called. I'm going to add in a butterfly, let's add in an ant, and let's add in a snail. There we go. Now, as I said, there are 2 different versions. There's the simple version and the advanced version. So the simple version just involves using the picture or the image that you have selected. Okay, if I want to click on the advanced version, that will expand it slightly and it will require a title and a description. So I would use the simple version when you're first introducing branch and just have the images and get them used to sorting data. The advanced version would be a great option if you are revisiting this, in further years. Again, thinking more P6 and P7 or year 5 and 6. They can then use that as a kind of a research project. So, for example, they go away and they research information about the snail. So, I don't know, lives in a certain habitat or lives for a certain period of time or weight or dimensions, that kind of thing. And then you use that description information to then formulate your sorting questions. Okay. But I'm going to stick to the simple version for today. Now, if you have added a piece of data onto your tree and you want to remove it, all you have to do is hover over that piece of data and just click on that bin, and that will take that away. So if they do make mistakes, it's easily undone. When they've added all their data, they're going to go to sort at the bottom, and that is going to prompt you with a question. So we're going to say, can I fly? So these have to be questions. And then what you're going to do is you're going to drag the option or the data that it applies to onto the left, and the data that it doesn't apply to on the right. Now, I suppose there's probably someone in the background going, well, some ants can fly, but that particular ant cannot fly. Now, if they drag the data onto the wrong option, all they have to do is click on that little recycle option, and that will refresh that and will drag it up here, and then they can re-drag it again. They can also record these questions. So great for building in some skills. Maybe if you're doing some sound recording, they can click on that and that gives them the usual recording option. So we can just say, can I fly? And that will link that sound. We can listen back to it. Can I fly? So that's a nice little feature. If they go wrong, they just press that X and that will remove that audio recording. And then we click OK. And it's going to ask us for another question. So, do I have a stinger? I've feel like there might be a more scientific name for it, but we'll go with Stinger for today. And we're going to drag the one that it applies to and the one that it doesn't apply to on the right. You do have the option here to have a look at the question history. So that is the question that precedes this question, can I fly? And then we click OK. And then we'll say, do I have 6 legs? Yes and no. And then we click OK. And there we go. We have built our tree. So at the end of it, they can click play. Now what they can do is they can either choose one of these options here. So for example, let's have a look at butterfly, and then they can use that. So can a butterfly fly? Yes. Does a butterfly have a stinger? No. And it's going to prompt you to say, is this answer correct? Now it could be that they were thinking about something else. So they could say no. Do they want to add in a new item? Yes, so we might have been thinking about a dragonfly instead. So we're going to add in our dragonfly. We're going to click OK. I don't have a question for this. So we're going to say, do I live near water? So dragonfly, yes. Butterfly, no. Click OK, and that has added that as a whole new branch into our tree. So they can keep doing that and building up that branch and building and building. So there we go. That is our branching database. And of course, they would save their branching database. They would rename it and then click save, and that will save into their My Files. So that is JIT branch. So we've looked at adding a background, adding in that data, classifying or sorting the data using questions, using the simple or advanced mode. We also looked at adding in audio, and we have saved our branch. Right, now for the tough bit. We're going to look at database now. So database is a fantastic tool, and it showcases pre-populated databases which are available to you. So we have a variety of pre-populated databases in the examples area, including Titanic data, which I am going to show you. You can also create your own. You can share these databases and make them collaborative with students as well. So that's a nice activity to build in. And we can manipulate and analyze the data in a visual format. So this is an example of a collaborative database that I've created. So this is what database looks like. And we have our form that I've created. This has been shared with the students and made collaborative. And we have 12 different records. So you can see we can flick through these records here. So they have populated those. There is a form tab. There is a table tab, so they can see those bits of data side by side. So that's quite a nice view. And there's also the option to create a chart. So if we look at our table, we've got favourite subject. So we might want to have a look at that favourite subject in a chart. So we can have a look at favourite subject, and we can see there quite clearly we've got English, and science are our most favourite subjects in class. You have different chart types within database. So we've got our pie chart. We can see that. And that is interactive as well. So we can hover over these and it's going to give us the numbers. So we can see 3 people like English, 3 people like science, and it's 1 for all the others apart from DT. Okay. So I'm going to start from the beginning. We're going to create a database now. So database can be found off the Launchpad within J2 Data, which is here. And that is our database tab. So whilst all the others can be found in JIT, although these do link, so you can use this link if you prefer, database can only be found in J2 Data. So I'm going to click on database, and that's got our lovely blank database. So we have one field ready to enter and define. So I'm going to add in my field name. So I'm going to just have name, and we can define our field type. So at the moment, and by default, it is text. We can use this drop-down menu, and we have lots of options here. So, you could add in things like photo, sound, video, or email address, phone numbers. So it's a great way of sort of building up a list. We've also got a list there, Boolean search, multi-line text, or just text. I'm going to go for just text because it is a name, so obviously they're going to want to enter that. You've also got things like units that you can set, and you can make it default. Now, if I click in field name, I can hit enter, and that will add another field, or you also have this button here that will add in another field. So they both do the same thing. And then we are going to have favorite subject. Would help if I could spell. There we go. Now for this one, I'm going to make it a list, because if I leave them sort of free reign of choosing their favorite subject, we might get things like spelling mistakes. They might choose something like playtime that isn't a subject. So you want to give them a very specific list to choose from. So I'm going to scroll down to list, and by default your list will be a yes or no option, but we can delete this out and we can add in our options. So let's go geography, art, it's got to be ICT in there, and history, for example. And there we go. Now we could add units in there. So if you were doing things like height or length, you could add in centimeters as well. Now I'm going to leave that as it is. I could add multiple fields as we did in the previous database, but I'm going to leave that for now. Now at this point you need to save the database. So we're going to go up to save, and I'm just going to title it subjects in class and hope I haven't used that, and click save, and that has saved a version of that into my files area. And now that I've defined the fields, I can go to the form, and that's going to show me the form. So this is where we can enter in data. Now, depending on how you want to use this with your class, you could enter this data for them. So you could add in, for example, let's go for, I'm just going to add myself, Nikki, and my favourite subject's got to be ICT really. And then I can hit save, and that has added that as a record into our database. So if I go to table, there we go, I've got me. We go back to our form. Now I could enter, as I said, enter that data on behalf of my students, but I might want them to enter that data themselves. So that's where we're going to build this up to be a collaborative database. So for your students to have access to this, we need to share it. So at the top of the screen, we've got the share option here. And this is the same as we did with our JIT Pictogram, except we've got a little blue box here for some reason. I can click that blue box and I can share with my whole class. You can share with individual users as well, or classes that aren't your usual class. So you've got lots of options there. And I'm going to share with my class. Now the really important part in this, if you want them to be able to enter any data, you have to tick this box that says edit. Otherwise they'll just be able to view that database. They won't be able to enter any data. So it really depends on how you want to use it. And there we go. So now I'm going to log in as my student. So let me just open up my student's account. And I'm just going to close these and go from the beginning. So again, the same as we did with Pictogram, they're going to go to their shared files area. They're going to tick this box that says list files. And there is that database that I've just created. So they're going to click on that subject. And now they've got the option to add a new record. So here we go. So I'm logged in as Lottie. So let's go Lottie. And her favourite subject could be art, for example. And then she clicks save, and that is going to save in real time into that database. Now, there's nothing stopping them, unfortunately, from creating multiple records. But this might be something to do, it's quite nice as a group work activity. So I am going to enter some additional students just very quickly. Let's add Davey and Josh. and Mary. Mary can have history as her favourite. So now if I go back to my database, you can see I now have 6 records ready to use. Okay, so it does update in real time. You don't need to refresh anything. And I can have a look at those forms. Now, as you build up more and more records, this is where you build in this understanding that looking at these forms on a sort of one-by-one record basis is not the most time efficient. So that's where you start looking at maybe your table instead. I'm not sure why that's not showing. Let's refresh my page. There we go. There we go. So now I can see those records side by side, and that's going to give me a little bit more information. Now with 6 records, that's easy enough. We can kind of see, and we can order things. So I can click on favourite subjects and it's going to order those in alphabetical order. So I can see already that ICT is the most popular subject. Now, if you were to build up lots of records, you know, talking hundreds and hundreds, like many databases in real life, that is, again, not very efficient to be sort of looking at data in that format. So that's when we can build in things like our advanced search, and I am going to look at that in a bit more depth in our Titanic database in a second. And also we can look at things using charts. So for the charts, you've got your X and Y axes. I would tend to start with just looking at things in your X axes to start with. So let's look at favourite subject, and that's going to create by default a bar chart. And we can instantaneously see that ICT is the most popular subject in this class. Now you've also got the ability to change the chart type. There we go. So we've got pie charts, we've got scatter charts and line charts. So some charts are more appropriate than others. You can change things like the colour, and they can also save things. So you've got the option to save that particular chart, and that will save into their My Files. And you can also save that as an image. So if we save that particular chart as an image, that can then be used in other tools such as J2E5. So great if they're building up maybe presentations about certain things. So that is a very basic chart, a collaborative database for your students. Now I'm going to look at the examples, and in particular we're going to look at the Titanic database. This is a very useful, I'm going to close some of these tabs down. This is a very useful example because of its real life context. So there are 2 ways of finding the examples. You can find them at the top of database, and you can also find them using this Explore Examples tab within J2 Data. Okay, so they both lead to the same area. So I'm going to open up examples. There are a variety to choose from. So there's an example of pictogram, chart, and mini beast and branching database. So using the mini beast example, and then these 7 are using database. So there are some easy ones, so things like a pre-populated pupils one for creating a pupils database. So you don't have to create your own. There's a countries one, so that actually links into the Teach Computing scheme of work if anybody's using that. That is an activity that's involved in that. Mini beasts, dinosaurs, and a toy shop. So that's an activity in itself. But here we go, we've got the Titanic passenger list. So there are 1,300 or slightly over 1,300 records in here. So this is great for building in that real life understanding that we do use databases in real life. You know, most websites that we use are databases. You know, if you're using Argos, that's a database. If you're shopping anywhere, it's just all a database. And this is taken directly from the passenger list. So how I would teach this, I would generally kind of give them some questions, and we have some worksheets available in the library ready to use. And I would kind of just leave them to have a go. And I can guarantee the first thing that they're going to do is, if you want to say, for example, we want to find out how many how many people were called Harry on board, for example. I guarantee the first thing they're going to do is start flicking through these records. So there we can see we've got one Harry, and it's going to take me a while to find the next Harry. So that's a very inefficient way of going through the database. So that's when you would build in things like using the advanced search at the top. So if I click on this it's not a microphone, magnifying glass, I can start defining my fields a little bit. So let's have a look. I want to find all the people called Harry. So I'm going to go first names, and you've got equals to, you've also got your more than, less than, more than and equals to, or less than and equals to, or contains. And then the value. So for the value, we're going to add Harry, for example, and then I'm going to hit enter. And that has reduced that record right down to 3 people. Okay, so I've got 3 records with that first name. So that is one way of looking at the data. I'm just going to X out of that. Then you can start building on that and talking about the table. So again, you've got your advanced search at the top. You can also, as we did earlier, start using the columns. So I might want to see how many of a certain gender were on board. Now, obviously, that's quite difficult, so we can't really see that. So I could say, right, gender equals to, and we want to see how many women were on board, for example. So I can use that drop-down menu. How many females are on board? We can see that is 466. You've also got the option to add the and or options. So I might want to know how many girls were on board. So we might have gender equals female, and we're going to have the age, and we're going to have, I can never remember which way around it is, equals to or less than. Let's give it a go. I got it right. Equals to or less than 18, and we can see there we've got 105 girls are on board now. So that has streamlined our data. Okay, so that's a great way of adding those sort of field defining searches in there. Now I'm going to get rid of these, and we're going to look at the chart finally. I am going to run a little bit over, but only by about 5 minutes. So if you need to go, please feel free. This will be available on YouTube as a recording. So the charts, you can track the X, Y, and you can group all of these. So I am going to create a chart. I want to show the survivors and victims within each class that were on board. So first of all, I'm going to choose the classes. So this will give me some numbers in terms of how many of each class are on board. So we can see there's a huge amount of third class, probably the same amount as the first and second class combined. So already I've got some great visual data there. And again, same as we did with our collaborative database, you've got the option to save that as an image or to save that search if you wanted to. Now I've also got this option to group. So I'm going to group according to survivor or victim. And there we go, that has grouped it. So I can see I've got my first class survivors, my first class victims, second class survivors, second class victims, and so on. So already we can see straight away that the third class, there was a completely disproportionate amount of the third class that didn't survive compared to the first and second class. Now I've also got the option to change my chart type. So I can look at these in different chart types. Some of the chart types will be more appropriate than others. So line and scatter charts, they don't tend to work with this particular search. These are great for the dinosaur database though, because you can sort of track how big and small these things are. So I'm going to stick with my pie chart. You can 3D it, and you can stack things as well. Okay. So there we go. And I can click on any of these and it will kind of move that segment. The numbers are interactive, so as you hover over, you can see there's 201 first class survivors, 537 third class victims. So that is a really nice feature. And then we can save that. So I'm going to save that. And just to show you, so I'm going to open up my files. There is that pie chart. So that is there as an image. So if I was, for example, doing a J2E5 presentation about the Titanic and creating some facts, this is J2E5. I can click anywhere. I could add a title. If I click on my pictures tab, there is that lovely database pie chart. So I can expand that and I can add that into my presentation. It looks very professional. Okay. So that is the Titanic database. Now, as I said, in the library, we do have some resources ready to go. So there is a Titanic database. In fact, I'm going to flick over to the next page. So this database search is a fantastic resource. You can find it by searching for Titanic. So this is the library, if you haven't seen it. So these are pre-made activities that you can share with your students. So this is written in J2E5. There is a link for the database, but it will only work when you're in view mode. So it's opened up in the edit mode. If I go to view, the kids can click on this. That will take them to the database. So they have that to refer to. And then they can go to edit and they can start entering some information. So we said 3 passengers were on board with Harry. How many passengers boarded at Southampton? So we can have a look. Let's look for boarded equals Southampton, and we can see it's 912. So they can add that in and they can carry on, and there are some extension activities. And then once they're done with that, they click save and a copy will save into their My Files as evidence. I have too many tabs open. Let me close some of these tabs. There we go. And other resources that we have available. This is a fantastic resource that is made by one of our consultants up in Hull, one of our freelance consultants. This is all to do with Marvel data. So if you do have a superheroes theme, this would link in really nicely. And he's actually created a pre-populated Marvel superhero. So the children can create their own, or if I click on this, and if you click no at this point and go to the form, he has pre-populated this database with all of the Marvel superheroes. The students can start comparing things like power, stealth, their technology capabilities, their gender. It's got images, so they can start to have a look at things like, let's look at name, and then let's have a look at the power on the y-axis. So I can see there which ones are the most powerful Marvel. So we can see probably the most powerful one, Thor and Galactus. Clearly I'm not a Marvels buff. So that's a nice way of engaging some of your students with kind of a real life context that they are interested in. And then finally, we've got things like pictograms. So these are great for your younger students. So this is made in a JIT mix file. So you've got an image on the front page and they have to count. So for example, the pterodactyls, we've got 5 pterodactyls. So they add that onto that data, onto that pictogram, and then they can sort of flick between the 2 pages. Now, anything that you find within the library that you like and you want your students to access, you just have to click the share button and then you can share either individually or with the whole class. If I click OK, and just to show you from the student's perspective, they access any library resource that's shared, doesn't share through the shared files, they have to click on the library. And there we go, there is that pictogram activity. My student can open that up. If they make any changes to this, so for example, let's add that, and there we go. They click save and that will save a copy into their My Files. So you do have that as evidence once they've completed their homework, once they've completed that activity, and you can set them as homework. So that concludes our session. 6 minutes over, I'm sorry. So these are our contact details. If you need us, that is our email address, edteam@j2e.com. Please feel free to get in touch. We are on Facebook and Twitter, X. Just look for Just2easy. And we're also on YouTube. So that is Just2easy TV. And we are running some live lessons. So there is a Titanic database live lesson ready. It is recorded already, so you can play that with your class, follow along. I will take you through that activity that we've just done at a much slower pace, and the kids follow along. So that's a really nice way of upskilling yourself. So please have a look at that. That is under the live tab on Just2easy TV. So have we had any questions? Mary, do you want to relay anything that you haven't been able to answer?
Can you possibly just go over, if you have saved a branching database and you've played it the whole way through and it saves that it's now complete, can you show how to edit and add
how to edit it? Yeah, of course. So let me open up my JIT branch. So I'm going to load. So that's how you load pre-made branches when you're in branch. So I'm going to load my branch that I did earlier. So if we go to play, so for example, I'm going to think of a slug this time. So a slug can't fly. Does it have 6 legs? No. Snail. So it's going to prompt me with this, is this answer correct? So at this point, if they're thinking of something different, so a slug, we're going to say no. It's going to prompt you to add a new item. So do you want to add a new item? Yes. And that is when you can find the image that you want. So that is going to be within Mini Beasts for this example. I'm going to click my slug and I'm going to click OK. And then it's going to prompt you with that further sorting question. So we're going to say, do I have a shell? And then you just drag the item that it applies to and the item that it doesn't apply to, and then click OK. And that has then added that as a further branch in branch. Now, the other thing that I didn't showcase is you do have the editing option here in the sort of top left, and that applies for the questions as well. So if you find that the questions are slightly incorrect or they need reviewing, the kids can click on that pen, sort of pen image, and they can edit those questions. So they aren't set in stone, and we can edit this. So we could change that image. So if you've got something different that you want to add in there, you can add it there. But that is how you would add in another piece of data into an existing branching database. Okay. Any other questions?
No, that was us.
No. Fantastic. I'm going to close some of these tabs down because I get very confused. Right, well, feel free to add a few more questions into the chat, but if not, then thank you ever so much for joining us and giving up your precious time on a Tuesday evening. I hope you've enjoyed the session. We are running lots more sessions throughout the year, so those can be booked through just2easy.com/training. We will put a link on our socials a bit later as well. So thank you very much.